everyone, Andrew here, and welcome to today's video where I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about one of my favorite video game consoles, the NES, and discuss just how I go about playing video games for it, because it's not as simple as you may, initially think. Anyone who's been watching my videos recently will know that I usually sit in front of a wall of like over 700 NES games, so I do definitely, when I play any of those, want to make sure I'm getting the best quality that I can, and also, make sure that they work as quickly as possible, because anyone who has tried using the front-loading gigantic gray brick original NES model will know that depending on the state of the pins inside there, they stretch easily, they get dirty easily, they're hard to clean. It can sometimes be a battle getting an NES game to work. So that's definitely one of the main reasons why I would never recommend to anyone to play on your video games on this. You can't. Some people do replace the pins in there and do all sorts of other mods to it to try and make this thing better. But I think that there are just better options out there overall that don't require you to start messing around with this thing. Many people, if you ask them what they think the best way to play NES games is, they will probably tell you the top-loading NES model 101. This, of course, had far better reliability than the big, the big box front-loading model, and it also did not have any kind of region locking, so you could play your European games in there without having to do any kind of modifications to the lockout chip. So it's very good for those reasons. However, where it significantly lacks is in its video quality. It just does not look very good at all. Not only does it lack any kind of ability to use the red, yellow, white AV cords with it, it also, if you use RF, looks worse than if you are using RF with the big blocky model. For some reason, if with the top loader, you get lines down the screen and it just does not look good at all. So what some people do is they mod this to add AV compatibility to it, but I think that there is even a better way to, once again, play your NES games without having to worry about any modding. And even if you mod your NES top loader, I still think that you are missing out with various features and things compared to what you get if you use the AV Famicom to play your NES games. So what this is this is the second model of the family computer, the NES as it is known in Japan. Many people probably have not really seen the top loading, or I mean both Famicoms were top loading, but this model of the Famicom, and probably would initially think that they are actually looking at the top loading NES when they see this thing here, obviously based off of the same design. The awesome part about using this is that you can play pretty much all of your NES games on here, as well as your Famicom games, and it also has an AV port on the back, which is the same one used by the Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and GameCube. So that's fantastic. If you wanted, what I actually do is I just have one cord that I use for all four of them and just plug it into whichever one I'm playing at the time. Because, I'm obviously not going to be playing all four at the same time. That would be playing with power, if anything. So that is actually how I go about playing my NES games, and technically all of my 8-bit Nintendo games. This video is going to be called The Best Way to Play NES Games, but I think you are going to see, and kind of the analysis we're going to do of the AV Famicom here, just kind of the benefits that it gives you over playing NES games any other way. And yeah, I hope that you enjoy just kind of my look at that. We're going to be noting all of the positives that you get with that over these two guys, as well as noting a couple of the negatives as well. But I think that you will hopefully see by the end of this video that if you are really into NES, rather than going through the trouble of modding one of these things, or trying to play your NES games any other way, it is just so much fun and so convenient to have an AV Famicom that it's worth the little bit more of the price you're probably going to end up paying for it. But a lot of people charge a lot for the top-loading NES as well, and I do not in any way recommend buying this thing, because I just find it's not enjoyable at all to play your NES games on. So with that said, let's start the analysis of the AV Famicom. So the first thing that many people are probably wondering, since it is a Famicom, is how do I play my NES games on this thing? And what you're going to need to do is get yourself a 72-pin to 60-pin converter, because NES cartridges have 72 pins and the Famicom cartridges have 60 pins, so we need to be, there needs to be some kind of conversion there. Make sure that you do not accidentally get a 60-pin to 72-pin converter, because that is one that will allow you to play your Famicom games on your NES, and that is definitely a much more common converter out there. So make sure you're doing 72 to 60. It's actually really interesting because I own two of these converters, and the one that looks like it's better built and it allows your cartridges to have the label facing forward and towards you while you're playing the games actually has compatibility issues with a few games in my NES library. One specifically, Castlevania 3 will just crash right at the beginning when I use it with that one specific converter, but when I use it with my other converter, which actually looks like it's cheaper in quality, and when the cartridge is inserted into it, the label faces away from you, that one I have not found a single compatibility issue with any game that I have ever played with it. So from what I can tell, the AV Famicom is capable of playing any NES game, but it comes down to the converter that you're using, which determines whether or not, they actually work. So make sure that that's a little bit of, extra research that you do if you do plan to go the AV Famicom route when playing your NES games. For some reason, that front-facing converter has a compatibility issue, and I have absolutely no idea why. Overall, though, I do really enjoy playing my NES games on the AV Famicom, and since I have that converter that has no noticeable compatibility issues, I would say that the AV Famicom is compatible with every single NES game. Just watch out for what converter it is that you get. Putting NES games aside, since it is a Famicom, you also have access to the entire Famicom library as well, without, a 0% chance of any kind of compatibility issues, as it is, of course, an official Nintendo console. It's not like it's a Retron or something like that, where you may have to worry about there being a compatibility issue because of the emulation that's going on. It's funny that I mentioned Dracula 3 earlier being one of the games that doesn't work with the AV Famicom, depending on which converter you're using, because you're probably going to want to play the Famicom version of Castlevania 3 on the Famicom anyway, considering that it takes advantage of the Famicom's extra sound hardware, which was not present in the NES. That is, of course, one of the benefits of using the AV Famicom, is that you get access to the features which, even if you used a converter to play Famicom games on your Nintendo Entertainment System, you would not have things like the extra sound chips or the ability to use things like the Famicom Disk System, which just, opens you up to a whole range of other games as well. Just because of the access that you have to different features and to different games, that alone makes me really happy to use the AV Famicom as my normal way of playing Nintendo 8-bit games. Not to mention, of course, the increased video quality that you get from it as a result of being able to use those AV cables that were, used all the way up to the GameCube generation. What happens is the AV Famicom does not support stereo sound. However, if you use both the red and white audio cables, you will get sound coming out of both speakers. Unlike the NES, which only had the red audio jack, unless you used a splitter, you would only get the sound out of one speaker. And the video quality is top-notch, just as you would expect from, again, any console up to the GameCube. So not only is the AV Famicom compatible with the Famicom Disk System, but it also has a port on the side which allows you to plug in a variety of Famicom exclusive accessories, including the Famicom keyboard. This is, of course, on top of the fact that the AV Famicom on the front includes the two external controller ports identical to the ones on your NES. So any NES controllers that you can use on your NES are compatible with the AV Famicom. Plus, with this extra port, you have access to the keyboard or the Famicom 3D system, or the Famicom Arkanoid controller, or Light Gun if you happen to have those. So it definitely opens yourself up to pretty much anything you want from the Nintendo 8-bit era you can use on the Famicom AV. The only exception to this is that, unfortunately, the AV Famicom does not have any way to support the microphone that was a big feature of the original Famicom. Of course, not too many games really require it. One of the only ones I can think of offhand is Takeshi's Challenge. You actually need the microphone in order to beat that game. However, in many other games, it was more kind of an optional feature or like a bonus that was not 100% required. So you're still going to be good, for any of those games. But again, if you're playing NES games on your AV Famicom, all of those would have been changed when they were localized to not need the microphone anyway. So you'll be 100% good playing NES games on your AV Famicom. The other thing that needs to be mentioned in all of this is just how exactly do you hook it up. Of course, with the power, there is a little bit of a difference between North America and Japan, where North American power outlets provide 120 volts of electricity, while Japan only provides 100. Many people talk about using a step-down converter. So use the original Famicom power supply, but then step it down to just 100 volts so that you don't accidentally do any damage to your AV Famicom. But the method that I actually use is using a Genesis Model 1 power cord, which has the black tip, because the later Model 2 and Model 3 and, a whole variety of other things that Sega released after that all use one with a yellow tip. But the one with the black tip will fit perfectly into the back of your AV Famicom, and I have never had an issue with any kind of overheating or, frying of the Famicom's internal boards. When doing this method, I've had, 5-6 hour gaming sessions, and I've never had a problem when using the Model 1 Genesis power cord. However, whatever you do, do not plug an NES power supply into the back of your AV Famicom, because you will completely fry it. What happens is the NES power cord does not convert the AC power into DC when going into the console. That conversion is done within the actual NES console itself. Unlike the, of course, Famicom power cord and the Sega Genesis Model 1 power cord, where that conversion is done in the power brick itself, so you're not, it's going to be converted from AC to DC by the time it gets to your Famicom. And yeah, again, using that Genesis Model 1 power cord, I have never had a problem, and that can be used for both the AV Famicom and the Famicom Disk System without really needing to worry too much. Again, disclaimer, if anything does happen, I cannot be held responsible. If you do want to go the step-down converter route, that is definitely available to you as well, but it can be kind of a pain, so just know that the Genesis Model 1 power cord route is available to you, should you wish to use it. And those are my reasons why I think that the AV Famicom is a really awesome way to play not just your NES games, but of course also Famicom and Famicom Disk System games as well. It's just such a neat little console, and all the different things you can do with it, with all its different ports. It's just a lot of fun. Again, I also point out, a couple of negatives that it has. I have no idea why, depending on the converter that you use with it, your compatibility is different, so that is really strange, and not something that I really knew about. When I went into making this video, I thought that it was just 100% compatible, because again, with that one converter, I have had absolutely zero problems, but then there is the one that seems to be the more common one that you can buy online, which for some reason has issues, despite the fact that it looks like it's, better quality than the other one. No idea what's up with that. But still, I think that there's workarounds, and I think that this is just overall a great way, and definitely better way than the other options that are available, like the front-loading and top-loading American models, just to play your 8-bit Nintendo games. And hopefully through this video, you've seen some of those points and agree with them, but maybe not too. Let me know in the comments what you think is the best way to play NES games, if not the AV Famicom. Of course, this is about the best way to play it on official hardware. And there are, lots of third-party things out there now. People have created ways to play NES games on your TV with HDMI and stuff like that. And also, to add into that, is the official NES Mini, where if you put the effort into, changing the firmware that is on there by default, you can find some, read-only memory online and really stock this thing up with, all the NES games you'd probably ever want. So this might be the way to go if you're looking to play your NES games on a more modern setup with an HD TV and all that. But for me, I like to play them old school. I like my old CRT TVs. I want to make sure I have that light gun compatibility and compatibility with, all the other accessories that you cannot plug in to this thing here. This is how I enjoy to play my my Famicom and NES games, and hopefully I've introduced it to some of you out there as well who are big NES fans like myself. Definitely something to look into. It can be, a little bit expensive, but regardless, if you're trying to, create a retro setup for your NES games, you're going to be paying for a console and some accessories anyway. So hopefully, if you're a collector, you might even have a few of the pieces like the AV cords or maybe the Sega Power cords, which can help you, get a head start on that kind of project. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching. Again, please let me know what you think down in the comments, and I hope to see you next time when we talk about something different. So thanks, and see you later.